Nan, would you be willing to talk a little bit about a new space that you're developing that plays into so many of these trends, and that may not be able to be duplicated dollar for dollar in smaller organizations, but I bet there are many ways in which it could be duplicated?
So our board made a 3-year commitment to a laboratory to discover things, just really, it's a research and development space to discover the emerging preferences for both artists and audiences. And in the backstage of Davies Symphony Hall, there's a large rehearsal space for the San Francisco Opera. And we've made a 3-year commitment to take that over and create a 6-month-a-year pop-up club for 3 seasons. And the whole focus of the club is really to explore and do research and development on what musicians want and how audiences might experience in that. It will have all different kinds of seating configurations. There'll be a kit of parts of visual and auditory support for the musicians that come in. We definitely plan to do interdisciplinary work in there. Our musicians, the musicians of our orchestra, will be central to every single one of these performances. And after each one, we'll be gathering feedback from both the artists who performed and the audiences who attend. So we're hoping to learn a lot. We're definitely expecting to make mistakes and goofs along the way. I think if we had the answers, we wouldn't feel a need for this laboratory, this music lab we'll be launching next year. But we're really just going to try things.
I was just going to ask, we're going to open it up to questions in just a few minutes from you, but I wondered, Alan and Nan, if you could comment on how this sort of need for human-to-human contact after we spend too much time in front of the virtual space, all of us, how that pertains to social media and how you've seen the advent of social media affecting the concert experience, if so.
You mean aside from people
How
using their
significant is
devices
it?
during concerts?
Yeah, how significant is it?
I think is actually, a colleague of mine, Ron Evans, got a hold of Google Glasses and is trying to collaborate with some orchestra on running interpretive content on the music on the Google Glass, because it doesn't affect anyone else's experience. It's private. It's like super titles. It's like private super titles. So that's, that's coming. It's maybe, before it comes to market, who knows, another 5 years or so. But social media.
Yeah, I think social media has completely redefined everything about the media landscape. How many of you just read sort of the Twitter headlines to get your news rather than actually pick up a newspaper? How many are using aggregated social content to actually inform yourself about what's happening in your community or in the world? Breaking news actually happens in social media now, not necessarily on traditional news. So it's completely flattened the traditional hierarchy of curated journalism, to think about that word from my perspective. I see a emerging trend for younger audience members that they actually don't feel like they're experiencing a live event without the sidecar of social media. So for our older customers, they might want to take a picture and put it on their Facebook page as part of their concert experience. For our younger customers, I see social media being a major driver behaviorally. They actually are not getting as much out of the experience unless they're concurrently, tweeting about it or using social media. So that's a very different thing than social media as a public relations agent or a news agent. It's about the expression of their individual experience over the internet in a way that's integral to their behavior and how they spend their leisure time.
What surprised each of you most about the results of this study? If I may ask, Alan, maybe you can start.
Oh, what surprised me the most?
Yeah.
Is that at the board meeting where I had 7 minutes. The head of the building committee stood up and said, you know, pop-up spaces, we really should think about that. And the uptake at a strategic level on some of the core ideas was, you know, almost never happens.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, I shouldn't be surprised because the quality of leadership, but
Yeah, I was astonished too by that, I have to say, when Nan shared the news with me about the pop-up clubs at the San Francisco Symphony. I said, what? But what about you, Nan, from the research?
Think, you know, and I did a lot of arts research. I was at Lincoln Center for 12 years before I came to the San Francisco Symphony 5 years ago. I think there's a real sea change in people's perception about audience research and whether it's necessary or not. I think it's very possible to imagine in the 1980s and early 90s it absolutely wasn't necessary. If you're running full houses, I don't think you should go do any research. It seems to me you've really hit the sweet spot and are serving your community well. The sea change for me of this work was how interested everyone in the organization was in the findings, simply because everyone in the organization, the musicians, the board, the staff, invested audience members, can feel the change. They know there's an enormous amount of change, and the desire to understand the contours of that and just get some general sense of direction, that they were interested. You know, 15 years ago, when I presented audience research, they said, yeah, that's nice. You know, that's for the marketing plan. And I think there's a sense now of mapping the mission more closely alignment to the community and who you serve. It's become a more core strategic objective of the organization. So I think the research, the ears were open for it.
Oh, go ahead, Alan.
no, let's take some questions.
Yeah, well, let's hear from you guys. Yes, please.
Oh, Gail, before I get to my question, I just wanted to let you know that Pandora is basically pure sugar and instant gratification. So as long as I live, you will be the executive director, producer.
Looks like you have a long, long life ahead of you, too. Thank you very much.
Yeah, he is kept to prove that, so I appreciate that. I read an economist article that talked exactly about what you were talking about, where when you talked about the definition of classical music, where they were talking about how a lot of the independent musicians, classical musicians who couldn't get the LA Phil job, they're doing lots of innovative work where they're performing in very non-traditional venues. And so maybe we're overestimating the decline of classical music events because we're not really counting those non-traditional events like coffee houses or other events. So it seems like the more bigger established orchestras would have to somehow participate in that. But with their very traditional base of donors and traditional ticket and subscription holders, how do you encourage them to kind of take some risk and break away from that? Because if they don't engage those case community, they're not going to have audience. They get based down. How do you engage? How do you get more established?
I think I can probably repeat it with a microphone. You're going to have people who are used to going to the concert hall and experiencing a formal concert, and those are the core of your subscribers. How do you get them to sort of loosen up and go to the pop-up club, or to be willing to go to unconventional venues? Is that?
Not the audience. I think it's the job of the organization, a culture organization, whether it's the LFO or San Francisco Symphony, to take the artistic leadership to
Okay.
and show the audience the various possibility of presenting these music. So how do the leaders of these cultural organizations take that step and take the risk and be not afraid of stepping away and maybe alienating some of their traditional donor-based subscribers?
So it's about, in the first place, the arts organization or the orchestra taking the risk of presenting in unconventional venues and possibly alienating the core audience and even musicians not used to that. You want to, that's sort of the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It's an excellent question, and it's at the very central, nexus of our struggle, because what we have is a concert that starts at 8 and it ends at 10:30, and it's in a geographically explicit location, and we have people who want to behave in different ways in that concert hall, right? And the core audience, which is flat to declining, has a very set point of view about that protocol, right? And so I do think you have to approach research in a strategic way, because you don't want to alienate your core audience. You can see from that slide, they're going to be around, right? So we'll continue to serve an aging audience, but you do have to carve off time and space for research and development for emerging segments of your audience. I would also just say, our core audience absolutely wants the symphony to survive another 100 years, and our core audience is philosophically very devoted to the idea that we might experiment in order to reach that audience for our future sustainability. So you can intellectually connect with them on an understanding for the R&D in a way that maybe it's not for them, they'll just be there for their regular Wednesday night concert, but they want the symphony to survive, and they're going to promote those kind of R&D explorations.
Excellent question. Yes?
Yeah, this is really
There's a mic right back to you there.
I'm sorry.
I have a mic, but it's not hooked on yet.
This is really a corollary question to what you had. You're speaking about the audience, the diversity of the audience, how to increase the diversity of the audience. But for most symphonies or classical art forms, the ticket sales only form a minor part of the total income for that concert, somewhere between 30, maybe 40, 45%. The balance must come from patrons who contribute, institutions who give grants. And so if you want to increase the diversity of what's being presented, in addition to, or supplemental to, just the classical, how do you do that without alienating your traditional financial supporters, at the same time drawing in a diversity of financial supporters?
It's difficult. It's difficult. We have some of the same issues, with the radio station, as you can imagine. We certainly have in our world the option of doing things on the web that we might not do on the air. But yeah, I mean, how do you diversify your programming enough to attract a more diverse audience without alienating the status quo?
Yeah, I would just, in response to that, call your attention to a national conversation that's happening right now amongst funders about capitalization and sort of growing clarity around the undercapitalization and miscapitalization of performing arts organizations. And the need for risk capital in the form of artistic reserves or money that would buffer you from an unsuccessful experiment. And most of our organizations are not set up to do R&D. It's a very decentralized field. So I don't think every one of you should walk out of here thinking that it's incumbent on you to become the R&D laboratory for the entire orchestra field. There are a few orchestras who are doing that. We need more. I call them greenhouse sites, where we can all learn. So I would say maybe it's time to start some conversations around the room about how can we experiment collaboratively and involve our funding partners and even find some wealthy individuals who believe in the need for R&D and want to invest in it. And kind of build some capital around product development.
Yes, in the back.
We've got one right here first.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
I think the best example of what this gentleman is talking about is the Met, in that instead of tuxedos and long gowns, you now have audiences in the movies in cargo shorts eating popcorn, and at a price that is significantly less than an orchestra seat at Lincoln Center. And I think that there are ways that the local orchestras can do that, whether it's, and I know there's copyright problems, because that's my field, but dealing with perhaps a short film of one piece and play it at the local movie prior to the beginning of the main feature. And there are other things, or appealing to public broadcasting and being able to rebroadcast part of a performance to enlarge the audience, because you gotta grab them to be able to get them. And I think that's one quick way of getting extra audiences. And we in the Folsom Symphony, we're working with schools and an outdoor concert, which is absolutely free. And hopefully we're gonna gain more market share. Just more of a comment than a question.
Thank you, guys. This is a great panel. I just had a quick question for you about the age groups. You showed the snake eating the pig chart earlier. And I think we're saying that the people who are 30-something now have different tastes than the people who are 80-something now. But that those 30-year-olds in 2050 will be 60 or 70, and that they will be more of them than than the younger people. So I guess what I'm saying is, what are the differences in taste for these 30-year-olds now? And basically, don't we need to really address those people's tastes now if we want the organizations to live throughout their growth and their getting older?
Well, that would be a strategy for survival. Yeah, I don't mean to be facetious. There's some research, and I can't figure out where it came from, that says that the music that you learn to love in your age, sort of 18 to 22, imprints on you, and you carry that with you for the rest of your life. And it's kind of true. It resonates true for me. I'm still listening to the Manhattan Transfer. So, there is musical taste, I think, sort of congeal in the young adult, and then of course it does evolve, but I think it's mostly set in the young adult years. Whatever you can do, to understand the musical tastes and preferences of younger adults, and start right there. And all of you can do focus groups for cookies and wine, and just talk to people. It's amazing what you can learn from structured listening, and it doesn't have to cost almost anything. You can find protocols in published reports that you can use and adapt, or you can email me or anyone else. But the learning has to start at home, and it's one of the things you can do tomorrow is to just always be talking to the people that you want to serve better.
I think one of the positive things as well is our participants under 35 were very interested in classical music, and there was not a disrespect for it. It's just on a gigantic playlist of many, many other options. So if I could connect that just one step down to the economic underpinnings of our organizations. Our organizations are built by and large with a smaller group of participants who came 6, 8, 12 times a year, okay? They're being replaced by the next generation of participants who are coming maybe 3 or 4 times a year. By definition, to be flat economically, you've got to serve twice as many people. Think about that. Twice as many names on the list, twice as many people who have never been, don't know where your restrooms are. So the whole hospitality social metric around what's happening as you gather people together is very different. You're actually going to need to serve more people because classical music is a smaller piece of their musical bandwidth. there was an enormous amount of respect and interest in classical music, absolutely.
Yeah. I just finished a 2-year study of music preferences of college students. It was broader than just classical music, it was performing arts in general. For the Hopkins Center for the Arts at Dartmouth College, commissioned the study with funding from the Andrew Mellon Foundation. And it's not out yet. It'll be disseminated in the fall. But college students, by and large, love classical music. I mean, we did 10,000 surveys on 8 campuses with undergraduate students. And right behind classic rock, indie rock, is classical music. And it's a little higher than rap or hip hop. And then, and you talk to them and say, I love classical music. I listen to it when I study, and I listen to it to go to sleep. And that's what we're. That's dark.
No, there in the green, back there.
I've got a mic here.
Yes, hi. I have a concern about the way we're kind of looking at this. You had mentioned that we have a need for human-to-human contact, but all you have to do today is go to a local Starbucks or even restaurants and look at the young generation. They are looking down, they're texting, they're tweeting, they're doing everything that we historically didn't do in our generations. And so I think the challenge in the future isn't to work on changing their taste and how they can enjoy classical music, but we're geared to getting people to listen to classical music in a confined space, a concert hall. Right now, this generation is really evolving to enjoying whatever their music tastes are, some of which are probably classical music, not in a public venue, but in their own private space, in their virtual world. So I think that the future challenge, which I think is very considerable, is really trying to present a way that they will want to go to a concert hall to enjoy this experience in a way that virtual participation, even with the same music, does not provide. That's the real challenge, I feel.
Yeah, and I mean the communal aspect. You know, I mean, I don't have to sell this idea to you guys. The communal feeling of being in a symphony hall and experiencing something at the same time as 300 other people or 700 other people. It's something magical, visceral, physical, sensational that can't be replaced, I think, by earphones, no matter how brilliant they are.
Nan, I'm recalling the comment in a focus group, one of your focus groups. A young man said, well, going to a live concert and sitting in the balcony is like watching a bad video. That really struck me. And I think it speaks to this, maybe the other shoe dropping on the virtual world. And what he was saying is, I want to be close to the artist for a live performance to hold meaning to me. Mm-hmm. And maybe this is signaling the return to intimacy, getting people into this full attention space.
That would be nice. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Yes, in the back row.
Sorry. So my question is, there's a lot of arts organizations, orchestras that are really thinking outside of the box, like Wild Up, the Brooklyn Philharmonic, in terms of how they approach concerts. And I'm wondering, a lot of the people sitting here, I think, are administrators, what your recommendations would be in terms of taking this information back to artistic and making these changes without having them feel like we're disqualifying their art form. So, we want to have people text while they're listening to you play your music, or we want people to maybe not be facing the stage. How do you interpret all of that to them without making them feel like we're taking what they do less seriously, or the audience taking it less seriously?
Well, I think that's very central, and it's why this research really ended up being more strategic, because our programming people were involved. And our programming people were interested in having lots of people experience what they were putting on stage. So interpersonally, if you're an offstage person, you need to develop a relationship with your artistic team so that you can have actually a constructive rather than a defensive dialogue about how to work with your community. Once you get to that shared space together, whether it be your artistic programmers or your musicians, I fully believe there are many, many creative ways forward. There's lots of ways we haven't even invented yet to address some of these trends. I'm very optimistic, but I think a divide, one that also, if there's mistrust, is not going to be productive to doing exactly what you're suggesting, which I think is central to the challenge.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question.
Okay.
Thank you. I just had a question for you regarding the data on the multicultural status. I'm surprised there wasn't more growth projected in multicultural.
Oh, that's a census definition.
Okay.
On the census form, you can identify as one or more races, and one of the categories is other race or multiple races. And after you take Latinos out of that, there's not much left, basically.
So, and you can, just to come full circle, just Google US Census Data. There's a quick facts link, and you can pick your county or the counties you believe you serve, and just like in 5 minutes out in the lobby, figure out what population you're drawing from for your live concert experience. How many are over the age of 25? How many are college grads? How many are high school grads? You're going to get to an explicit number. And then think about the size of your audience, and you'll instantly know how much of the community you're serving.
I mean, just to wrap up that whole demographic, it's one thing to know your community, it's another thing to know your audience and to be able to contrast the two. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really where this conversation needs to go. Unambiguous, clear data on who are you serving and who is in your community.
And there's a consultant in the radio field who says reality has a way of getting your attention. And partly an answer to the question from the back row, when you really look at the figures, at how things are changing, how trends in participation are changing, it has a way of getting to the attention of the powers that be. But again, engaging them in the process is what it's all about. It's all of our problem, rather than us versus them. I just want to thank Nan and Alan for their tremendous research and perspective and eloquence. Thank you.
I wanted to thank you on behalf of all of us for doing the heavy lifting of the R&D, and also for sharing that with us and helping us not just navigate and strategize, but actually embrace the trends that are coming. So thank you again, and we really appreciate you being here. Thank you.